Welcome to Mom Alternative, where we talk about motherhood, relationships, and parenting. Amongst other things, today we'll talk about feeling bad for your dog or household pets after you have a child, cultural perceptions around breastfeeding and how breastfeeding as a Black woman is different breastfeeding as a white woman, and eating bacon while pregnant. Our first topic of the day is titled Breastfeeding as a Black Woman. OP says, I'm a 35-year-old Black woman. My first daughter is almost 12. I was active duty and single with her, and I was not successful with breastfeeding. This time I'm married. I'm not working, and I have put together this entire plan to breastfeed my son. He has a growth restriction and will be small already. I get no support from nobody when it comes to breastfeeding. I have no idea why other women think it's okay to tell you that you won't be successful because they were not. It's so discouraging knowing that I already don't know what's to come. I've read and watched videos and classes. Every time I tell a family member, it's super negative. Sometimes I'm like, should I just bottle feed and not even try? But this is what I truly want. I don't know that many people in my family or friends of color that have breastfed, so I don't have anyone to talk to about it, but it is starting to annoy the hell out of me. My aunt was like, well, I'll give you 6 months at most. She was like, I'll put money on it. She said her nipples cracked and I won't like it and I shouldn't be breastfeeding no baby till they're 5. I'm like, dang, he hasn't even got here yet. Now, I'm obviously not Black, so I can't quite directly relate to what OP is going through here, but I find it very interesting that there are such totally different perceptions and ideas around breastfeeding depending on your ethnic background, depending on the culture you come from, depending on the country that you're in at that moment in time, and so on and so forth. There was a very long period of time in our history where white people, white mothers specifically, especially upper middle class white mothers, were the ones who were most likely to have access to things like wet nurses, which was the alternative to breastfeeding for a very long time. And so when formula first came up, and access to formula wasn't quite as widespread as it is now, those were originally the first types of people to make the switch. And now, like my particular culture, so I'm not white, I'm from the Middle East, ethnically speaking. In my culture, pretty much everyone breastfeeds. It is treated, I think is for the vast majority of people, it's not even a question whether you'll do it or not. The idea of feeding formula if you are able to breastfeed is kind of strange to us. And so it's interesting that we've gone through this shift now where the vast majority of white educated women in the US, at the very least, are breastfeeding, whereas there is this very heavy cultural difference between white people and Black people in that Black women do not have the same rates of breastfeeding as white women. And I suspect that that is part of what causes this kind of response to breastfeeding, because I think it's one of those aspects of motherhood and of raising babies that you kind of need some direct exposure to, especially when you're young, before you really develop an idea or an understanding of how it's meant to work. It's definitely one of our most primal, animalistic aspects as people, kind of a little bit like birth. You know, if you've never seen birth before, then the first time you see birth is quite a big shock. The first time you experience it is obviously quite a big shock for your body in general. But if you don't have any perception of what to expect or how it's going to work out or any idea of what birth is like, then the first time you see it, you're like, oof, this is pretty intense. And I think breastfeeding is not quite intense in that way, but it is very much this idea of, it separates us a little bit from this idea that we as human beings are separate from the animal kingdom, because suddenly you have a much deeper understanding and a much deeper understanding of our connection to other mammals, because all mammals breastfeed. I say breastfeed. All mammals, most, I guess, lactate, and that's how they feed their young. So this is a really interesting one to me. I think that, I wouldn't say anything different to OP from what I would say to anyone else. I think that there is an inherent wisdom to the fact that we have developed the ability to breastfeed over millennia, that it's part of our evolutionary psychology. And I think that the moment that you are doing things that are in conjunction with nature, the likelihood that you are doing things that are good for you and for your baby is much, much higher than any alternative method that we managed to come up with. And that isn't to knock formula specifically, like I understand why people might choose to formula feed, but it is one of those things where you can at the very least say, if we've been doing it this way for thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, then the likelihood that in 5, 10, 15, 50 years that we are able to develop something in that very short period of time that's going to be better for us or for our babies is highly unlikely. And so that's how I approach most of my parenting philosophies. That's how I feel about this one as well. To read some of the comments, a lot of these comments are from other Black women. Black mom to Black mom, if you're able to breastfeed, I say go for it. I've heard it all before I decided to breastfeed. Your boobs will be sore, they'll sag, it's going to hurt, it's uncomfortable, but I decided to give it a try and it was the best decision I could have made, and I'm doing it again this go around. I didn't breastfeed with my oldest because I was afraid and listened to all the negative comments, but I did with my second born. You may struggle with milk supply, but they make all kinds of lactation goodies and supplements to help with that. And with there being a formula shortage right now, I strongly suggest it if you can. There's so many benefits to breastfeeding for both you and baby. When they say liquid gold, they weren't lying. I don't knock people that choose not to, but I strongly try to encourage those that are considering it. Good luck. I think that there is this very strange habit that people get into, not only when it comes to breastfeeding, but also when it comes to pregnancy and also when it comes to parenting in general, where they always try to share the worst aspects of it. And that said, I do think that this attitude towards breastfeeding and all of the pain that you'll have associated with it, how it will change the shape of your breasts and what you look like, the idea of they'll sag, and the conviction that it's going to hurt, it's going to be painful, it's going to be uncomfortable. I think that that may come a lot more strongly in the Black community than I have come across it from other types of people. It's a real shame. Yes, sometimes, and for some people, breastfeeding can be quite difficult, and getting it right it takes time and takes practice. You can think of it something like a skill that also your baby needs to learn, that it's not one, that they don't just become born and then immediately know the perfect ways to breastfeed. They still need to practice it. But yeah, it's a real shame. I find it quite sad that women feel this pressure from all of the women that they know in the surroundings, who try to convince them not to when it is proven to be the best possible source of nutrition for your baby. So I hope that most people are strong enough to hold their ground. The next comment here says, I'm so sorry to hear you're having those reactions. I wasn't successful with my first, and my mom thinks the whole act is, quote, gross. Major eye roll. I really want to make it work this time around too. We have to stick together and be each other's support. And I think that's also really sad from that side of things. I almost think that these people who have this like visceral disgust or revulsion type of reaction to things like breastfeeding or birth are simply just people who've never seen it before, who have no conceptualization of it. I think a lot of these biological drives and urges that we have look to us from our very put together, clothed human mindset as if they are strange or weird or just like too out there. They're a little bit too close to nature. And I suspect that to a large extent we feel this intense reaction against it largely because of that. The next comment is I have been going through this as well, but I'm just ignoring the negativity of others. I've just been taking classes and reading to prepare as well. Many people around me have been telling me about how they fell into deep depression over issues of breastfeeding or of the many uncomfortable things that come along with it. I think they mean well, but they don't always get that it doesn't come across as such. As a first-time mom, I'm going into it with an open mind. If I can produce, great. If I can't, that's okay too. I say keep doing what you're doing and ignore the negativity. I think this is really utterly depressing, to be honest. I don't quite understand why people feel such an intense need to share their negative experiences with others. And I suspect actually that a lot of people share negative experiences from other people. So for example, if I were to have a child and then I decide by myself not to breastfeed, then it's very possible that I would start trying to influence the other people in my life to not do it, which I still also think is just wrong on a fundamental level. I don't know why parenting motherhood especially, I think more than just parenting, but motherhood especially is associated with so much negativity. Breastfeeding can be a wonderful experience. It can go perfectly fine. It is possible to educate yourself and to find resources and to get yourself support and to build a network around you that you understand how it works, that you understand what to expect, that you understand how to do it. You do not need to be scared. It does not need to be painful. And it's not as hard as some people make it out to be for the vast, vast majority of women. All right, and then our next one for the day is titled Mums with Dogs. Is this wrong? Major dog mum guilt. I can never win. OP says, okay, so I have 3 golden retrievers. Prior to having children, they were our whole world and so spoiled because we had time to spoil them. I also told myself that having kids wouldn't change the attention that I give them, but boy, was I wrong. Now we have number 2 due in a couple of weeks and I could really use some advice. We live in a very small old farmhouse, but live on a ton of land. When it's not too hot, I try to keep them out. I try to keep them outside to be dogs and roam. I can still see them, and we have trackers, but they act like it's the worst thing ever. With having a toddler, I've learned that keeping floors and surfaces clean are a chore in itself, and with dogs, it makes it so much harder with the constant shedding, dirt, and lately bugs follow them in. I found several dead ticks on the floor this spring. Anyways, when they are inside, I keep them locked in the laundry room with the air conditioning and their food and water. But I feel like they hate me. They want to be out in the living room with us, laying on the couch and rug, but I simply can't do it anymore. I love them to death, but my toddler and I eat on the couch quite a bit. And on the days I forget or simply don't have the energy to vacuum, their hair is everywhere. My son literally poops out dog hair. It's awful. Now, my main mum guilt question here is, should I lock them out of the living room permanently? They've damaged the furniture with their nails, heavily shed, and make the living room just gross. And with 2 kids soon, I know I won't have the time to vacuum every morning before I let them play in there. Is this wrong? I feel like I'm making them feel neglected. Now, I would never... Okay, so we have a dog. We were lucky in that we got our dog knowing full well that we were going to have a baby in the house soon. I was already pregnant by the time that we got our dog as a puppy. And so already from that mindset and with that perspective, we created pretty serious boundaries in terms of what we allow our dog to do inside the house or not. One of those things, for example, is he's not allowed on furniture. He's not allowed in beds, on beds. He's not allowed in some of the rooms of the house and so on. So we keep him on a pretty tight leash when it comes to how much we let him get away with. Obviously, he's only 1 dog. We don't have 3 dogs. And I cannot imagine the experience for a dog, or for 3 of them, what that must be like when they've gone through their whole life, knowing a particular way of behaving and being okay with a particular way of being in the house, and then finding that suddenly changed. And especially something like locking them in the laundry room to try and keep their hair contained. Like, that just sounds evil to me. It truly does. It sounds completely inconsiderate. It sounds like you are not actually watching out for your dogs at all or trying to set them up to succeed. Now, I say this as someone who also completely understands how much effort it is to try and clean up after dogs, who also gets that, hey, you know, the amount of restriction that you need to put in place with a dog and with a child is quite a lot already. And we don't have 3 dogs, so I can't even imagine the hair. And our dog is also not that big of a shedder, so I can't even imagine the hair situation that you're dealing with, because we already have a lot of dog hair that we're not very happy about. All that said, it is your responsibility as a dog owner and as a mother to kind of figure it out, to find a way for your dogs to still get their needs met in terms of being around the family, because of course they're very, you know, they need to spend time with you, in terms of having some room to roam in the house, that they're not just locked inside one room, which is quite intense. And in terms of still enabling your kids and letting them play. And this thing with her son pooping out dog hair, that is disgusting. I could not imagine any outcome in which that would happen with my son, at the very least right now. So we'll see how it gets when he's a bit older. But I would consider that to be a pretty serious problem if you aren't able to keep that under control. So, OP, I would probably say, if I were you, I would look for a different way of dealing with the situation. And if I could not find a solution of any kind, then I would probably try to rehome the dogs, because I don't think that there's any alternative way to do it I don't think it's fair or right to keep them locked into one room. And I understand like how much of a problem it is in general for you. And I completely understand why that is a problem. But you don't just have responsibility towards your kids, you also have responsibility towards the dogs that you own, because they did not ask for this life. They did not ask to be part of your household. You need to find a different way to deal with it. That's how I feel about this one. I'm also not the only person that says this. The first person says, I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but I do feel like if you have inside dogs, they should be able to be inside dogs and live where you live. It's a pain and a half for sure. My dogs shed so much. It's part of our diet. My son lately has been throwing tantrums, and he's a thumb sucker, so he'll throw himself on the floor with his wet thumb, put his thumb back in his mouth, and then throw a fit that there's dog hair on his thumb and in his mouth. I honestly feel like it's part of having dogs. Either clean constantly or live with the dog hair like we do. And damage to furniture is also part of owning dogs. I don't think it would be fair to keep them separated permanently. Now, yeah, I kind of feel it's a little bit cruel to the kid. I think it's a little bit gross for the kid. I would really look for a solution that does not involve my child having to eat dog hair, because I don't think that's very nice. But yes, in terms of it is your responsibility to try and figure out some kind of solution that works a bit better for your dogs and for your kids. I think it's much easier to, for example, keep them out of the living room, but then let them move in the rest of the house. I think it's also okay to try and spend time with them inside different rooms, so that, you know, if you're spending 100% of your time as a family inside the living room, then it is a bit cruel to keep them out of there. But then it's okay to still say, hey, the living room is going to be the primary play area for our kids, so we're going to keep that area clean. And then every now and then we go hang out with the dogs. They have full roam of the house during the day, and our goal is to teach our kids and dogs how to cohabitate well. We have a robot vacuum that we run, and it keeps the floors clean and allows me to not have to vacuum manually. I think it ultimately comes down to quality of life. You want your family and child to live in a safe, comfortable, loving environment. I would also say the same is true for dogs. If the quality of their life has significantly decreased due to living in a laundry room all day, it might be worth it to reevaluate your setup or think about giving them up. Exactly. I think it's really, really simple advice. And of course, it, almost goes without saying. So, this person I just want to highlight. I have 2 German Shepherds who shed like no other. They sleep in our bed on all of our furniture because we chose to do that. And now we deal with the consequences, which means vacuuming every single day. Honestly, the idea of sleeping on the same bed as a dog kind of just grosses me out. I would never do that. And having a child also on the same bed that a dog sleeps in would not be cool for me. But you know what? Maybe our dog is just too active and gets in too much mud on too regular of a basis for me to really consider what that looks like. And then this final post that I'll read here, she says, I knew when I read your post that dog lovers all over the world would be jumping down your back. I'm here to say you're not a horrible person for feeling this way. I've heard from so many friends and family members how their views on owning animals in general changed when they became parents. I've never been a dog person because of PTSD from family members that clearly shouldn't have owned them. But I did own a cat, and even that seemed so hard when I became a mother. You spend lots of money on baby stuff, and then a cat comes and scratches it up. Now, I actually don't think that there were a ton of dog lovers that jumped down her throat here. I think it's one of those moments where you just really need the reality check of knowing, hey, okay, this is not fair for the dogs. You know it's not fair, or you wouldn't be sitting there and writing this thread, and you also wouldn't say, hey, it feels like they hate me. So on some level, you understand that it's not fair for the dogs to be locked in a room all day because you don't want to deal with their hair. That's that is something that you signed up for when you decided to have dogs in your house. So yes, fair enough that having dogs and kids is different. One of the things that really annoys me, honestly, about people with pets is the fact that they kind of treat them like kids. Anyone who ever uses the term fur baby, like these are my fur babies, my son's fur siblings. I'm a dog mom. I find all of these terms just a little bit strange. I would never try to pretend that my dog is similar to a child. He is a pet, and I really appreciate him, and I think he's a great pet, but that's what he is. So some boundaries are really important, and I think understanding that boundary for yourself before you choose to have kids is probably super helpful, because then when you choose to have kids, you're not so shocked by the fact that there's a difference in how you are inclined to treat your child versus your pet. That said, you still have a responsibility towards them, and you should try and make sure that they have the best possible life, whether that is with you or without you. But you cannot pretend that you don't have dogs in your house after you have children. All right, our next one is titled Accidentally on Purpose Ate a Pound of Bacon. OP says, so is bacon okay? Are you all eating it? I didn't look it up until after I went ahead and smashed an entire package of uncured bacon about an hour ago. It was bad, a whole pound of bacon. It was so good. I feel fine, if not a little disappointed in my lack of self-control. This isn't something that I normally do. In fact, I have not had bacon in over a month, but should I be worried? My lizard brain was really telling me I needed some salty bacon goodness, and I was like, F it, say less. And intended to only have a few slices, but then is it panic time? What I find so utterly hilarious about this is the amount of fear. She doesn't even seem like she's scared, but she kind of, she feels a little bit guilty for it. She feels a little bit guilty. And that just blows my mind a little bit. Now, I understand that there's been a giant campaign railing against bacon. And I also understand that some people say, hey, bacon is super unhealthy, blah, blah, blah. Especially when she says it's uncured bacon. It's kind of the equivalent of just eating a pound of meat. And that's completely fine. I have no idea why it would occur to anyone to go, hey, this is going to be harmful for you and for your baby. I love the line, I feel fine, if not a little disappointed in my lack of self-control. Honestly, if you want to pig out on bacon, pun intended, I would pig out on bacon. Like, bacon is not a thing that I'd really stress myself out about at all. I think people maybe don't take super high sugary snacks anywhere near as seriously as they should, which are much more likely to be more harmful for you during pregnancy than any meat that you eat. But I do find it a little bit funny that people do these things and then they're like, was that allowed? Like, could I do that? In general, if you don't feel sick, you're probably fine. And you can see here the comments are mostly people saying, hey, you shouldn't really do this. But you're probably fine, but you really shouldn't do it. First person says, bacon is fine to eat occasionally. However, it's good to stay away from highly processed meats as they don't have much nutritional value and they are high in sodium. Now, this is a statement that, in my opinion, comes from people who don't know much about nutrition. I recognize that the conventional wisdom when it comes to bacon is that bacon is evil, but I would encourage everyone to read books like The Big Fat Surprise and to try and inform themselves a little bit more about food health and what is okay to eat and what is not okay to eat from a general, as a staple in your diet, I guess, whether bacon should be a staple in your diet or not. So yes, and in terms of that it doesn't have nutritional value, that's just a straight up lie. It has a ton of nutritional value. It also has a lot of calories, so this is true, but you will get a lot from it as well. Everyone is like, hey, it's just, you can have it in moderation, and sodium can contribute to dehydration, so make sure you drink plenty of water, etc., etc. Honestly, after a certain point, when you get too much salt in your system, you do have a bit of a salt aversion. The fact that everyone is like, oh, the salt's going to be too much for you. It's highly unlikely that you're going, unless you're eating multiple pounds of bacon every day on end without stopping, it's not very likely that you're going to have a terrible problem with it. The next comment says, not going to hurt you, and any OBGYN would encourage you to eat what will stay down. Sure, lots of sodium, but it's not like you eat a pound every meal. I didn't eat bacon often during pregnancy because that was expensive. Drink lots of water to help your body stay hydrated. The main concern with bacon is nitrates, and I lived off hot dogs practically during my pregnancy. Now, what I find interesting, also just a little bit amusing here, when everyone's like, hey, the main problem with bacon is nitrates, she ate uncured bacon. Now, nitrates are in curing salt, which is cured bacon. If it's uncured bacon, then there aren't even any nitrates in it. So the fact that I just find it always kills me a little bit inside, the level of advice people have about nutrition when they don't even understand the basics. Just the basics, like knowing what cured bacon versus uncured bacon is. This one, also a hilarious statement. I went through a 2-week BLT craving and ate about 4 BLTs in that time. I made sure the bacon was 100% cooked and had no issues. My OB actually said I could have bacon before the glucose test. Also a hilarious statement. Why would bacon spike your blood sugar levels? There is no sugar in bacon. I mean, okay, there is some sugar in bacon, but it's not comparable. It's not comparable to anything else that you might eat from a glucose perspective. It's just, at least there is one person who says, well, yeah, meat isn't going to spike your blood sugar. Maybe you should have some understanding before you comment on these things. And then, everyone else just finds it funny. I just want you to know that my husband and I are laughing uncontrollably. Eat what you want. You don't need to worry unless you're doing it every day. Exactly. It's not a big deal, and bacon is fine, and you can eat as much of it as you like. Our next one is titled, He Thinks Having Money Would Solve All Life's Problems. Something that's bothered me for a while. Husband is 100% convinced that being rich, or at least well off, would fix every problem in our life. He says we could afford a nanny or extra help with baby. Our kid could have the best of everything. He wouldn't be stressed. He literally thinks that it would change him and his outlook on life for the better. He talks about this all the time. He has this negative outlook about life and having to work so hard for the little money we do have. And while I understand, I just wish he could give me his best version of himself without feeling like he needs money to do all those things. I want him to step up and help out more with baby, not hire a nanny. Our baby has everything he needs to be happy. We aren't struggling to afford formula or diapers or anything like that. I can't afford the most expensive crib or stroller, but I don't give a damn about that because we have what we need. We argue so much ever since having a baby, who's now 4 months old, and he thinks that if we had money, we would never argue, even though our fights are never about finances. He made me second guess my thoughts yes, it's true, it would be nice to be able to afford a nanny or a doula who could help out when I'm overwhelmed or help sleep train or things like that. I'm just mad that he thinks it's not possible to give our baby a great life without lots of money. It makes me so sad that he thinks this way. We have such different views and attitudes. All I want is a husband who is positive, is grateful to have a family of his own and loving towards me, but I haven't seen this side of him at all ever since my baby was born. Such negativity all the time. Now, this is a really interesting thread for me because I'm probably much closer to the husband's perspective here than I am to the wife. Not that I think that having money solves all of life's problems, but honestly, it seems to me like there's a fundamental misunderstanding that they both have in terms of what their financial situation looks like and how that plays out on one member here of the relationship versus the other member. So I think what I would assume from just as an external person, from my perspective and looking at this, I would probably guess that he's the primary person responsible for finances in the house. And I would probably assume something along the lines of, yes, they are not, they might not be super poor. They're still able to afford the primary things that they need. But he, as the primary person responsible for the finances, feels very stressed out by the situation in which they find themselves in. Now, how that definitely there's a difference the moment you have children where you go, okay, hey, what's our future going to look like? What type of lifestyle can we afford for ourselves? What type of lifestyle can we afford for our child? How will our finances look in 10 years time, in 20 years time? Suddenly that becomes a very, very present question in a way that it was probably not very present when you're either single or when you're just a couple, because looking after just a couple of people or just yourself when you're single is just quite easy in comparison. So that he feels this burden of having to provide for the family as a husband is a great sign. And that he understands on some level that money would probably make a big quality of life difference to their life is probably also accurate. Now, I understand the point of saying, hey, he's just so negative all the time. But you know what? When people are really stressed out and the circumstances change and suddenly they realize that they're in a situation that maybe before they were okay with, but now they're not, and they don't have the tools available to them to change that situation, then it's kind of normal and natural to be negative about it. It's normal for that to be a source of conflict. It's normal to not be happy with it. It's normal to have this feeling of like, hey, I just want to change this. And a lot of people will say that the point at which people can change their life is when they are tired of that feeling. So when they are done with just feeling exhausted, feeling frustrated, feeling stressed out because of the circumstances that they're under. OP says here, he has this negative outlook about life and having to work so hard for the little money that we do have. So it sounds to me like they are probably on the verge of struggling. At the very least, it's most likely that you're living paycheck to paycheck or something like that, which is quite normal for people. You know, it's not that out there to be living paycheck to paycheck. But it makes perfect sense to me why this would be a stressful situation for the husband. So for me personally, I'm rather on his side, where I do think that having a little bit of money available makes a huge difference. I think the right word for it is margin, in terms of how much money extra you have left at the end of the month. And the more margin you have available at the end of the month, the more you feel like this weight on your chest and on your shoulders from struggling with finances kind of just goes away. That is a fact of life. Now, if I were OP, what I would do here would be to try and understand exactly where the finances are and exactly where this feeling and this negativity that he has is coming from. Because I don't think it's just this idea of saying, oh, okay, if we just had money, then everything would solve itself. But rather that I suspect that he feels that money is one of his biggest stresses, and that is what the fact that he's under stress is then what manifests itself in all of these fights that you seem to be having, which is a real shame. In general, 4 months old after having a baby, quite a lot of people go through this process. I'd say it's a metamorphosis, you know. Your relationship changes, you change because of the added responsibility of a child, the amount of time that you have for each other, how you talk to each other, like all of these things change the moment that you have a kid, because that's such a major change in your life. And so it's normal that things are a little bit out there for a few months, maybe even a year, until you get into a groove and you understand what you're doing and you try and get on the same page again. When she says, all I want is a husband who is positive and is grateful to have a family of his own and is loving towards me. I understand where the urge comes from. I do think that when you're surrounded by someone who's negative all the time, that's super draining. And if you have that while also being drained from looking after a 4-month-old, not being able to sleep all that well, etc., then I understand where the urge comes from. But I think that having this feeling of, hey, I just wish he was different, makes it hard to actually connect with him and to listen to him and to understand where he's coming from and to support him in such a way that you can try to break down that feeling or to come up with a way that you can tackle it and improve your situation together. And so, yes, positivity is great. Gratitude is great. These are definitely things that I would encourage everyone to try and do on a regular basis and to try to practice. Like a gratitude practice can really make a big difference. But it's also okay to have these periods of time in your life where you're really like, man, this just sucks and I want things to be different. And then to try to take that energy and channel it into something that will actually change your life for the better is one of the most rewarding things that you could be doing. That's how I would approach this one. I feel that I'm the only person who thinks about it this way. Almost the only person. The first comment that I'll read out here says, this would upset me too. My husband and I will sometimes fantasize about how awesome it would be to win the lottery. But that's just for fun. He needs to live in the moment and enjoy the life you guys have. Have you told him that you'd prefer that he help out more with your daughter rather than fantasize about being able to have a nanny? I feel like this kind of comment honestly misses the point quite like to a pretty big extent. Yes, it's nice to fantasize about how awesome things will be when you win the lottery. I think everyone has those little phases where they do that. But the statement, he needs to live in the moment and enjoy the life that you guys have, is really unfair. It's like, no, honestly, yes, he needs to be grateful for, there are always things to be grateful for about your life, but that doesn't mean that you need to give up on changing it. And the statement of, hey, have you told him that you want him to help out more rather than hire a nanny is also like, yeah, fair enough. You can talk about that. You can say that. But also chances are he would be in a much better place if he didn't have to work so hard to earn money. And then maybe the concerns around having a nanny around the house would be very different. Like, who knows, right? There's so many different situations and scenarios that they could be having. that would explain where this argument is coming from, that I find it difficult to just assume like this, that he's just living in la la land, that he doesn't have a serious, actual, real life, real world concern that he needs to deal with. Now, one person replied, he's right, which I appreciate, because I do think he is. Next person says, I mean, he's both right and wrong. Honestly, I've gone through times early on where my husband and I had next to no money. However, now where we're at a point in our life where we're very well off, your husband is right in the sense that money does make some things easier. We don't worry about buying things for our kids. We don't worry about bills or vacations. And because we don't worry about it, we simply don't fight about it. That's exactly the point, right? If you want to be able to afford a specific lifestyle for yourself, that makes a huge difference. When you're not able to afford that lifestyle, then you feel stressed out. Of course you feel stressed out. Then she says, however, where your husband is wrong is his mindset. You absolutely can be happy without having everything. In the years where my husband and I had nothing, we made some of the best memories of our entire lifetime. We made the best of it and we were genuinely happy. Your husband has to understand that unless he's doing something to change the current situation, he needs to find a middle ground and be grateful. Is he looking for a higher paying job? Is he trying to cut expenses? Is he starting a side business? If he's refusing to change the situation but just complaining instead, that would make me pretty mad. I agree 100% with this. I think the more you complain, and especially if you're complaining without action, then that's just really frustrating and a bit of a downer on everyone. But if you are complaining with the hope or the plan of some point transforming that into action, then I would get it. And then this person says, dang, your husband sounds like me and you sound like my husband. I'm a stay-at-home mom. Our 1.5-year-old will be doing therapy soon for his hearing loss once he gets his hearing aids, and we get disability that we use to buy the kids and household things we need. My husband is super content with his job and being able to be at our church every week on his off days. I'm seriously working on being much more grateful because we are stable enough. A little bit extra would be nice, but I know the Lord won't forsake us in all aspects as long as we put him first, and my husband constantly encourages me all the time to just be grateful for what we have and not ponder on what we could or should have. And to that I would say, honestly, if you're unhappy with where your life is at, then just work on improving it. I think that there is this feeling that, hey, this is just our lot in life and this is just how we'll live. And these are the struggles that we're experiencing. It's kind of powerlessness, right? And acceptance and passivity. You don't need to treat your life that way. You can take responsibility. You can try to change your circumstances. And the moment that you're trying to change your circumstances, you will also feel better, honestly. It's not just a case of, hey, like, I believe that a big source of the frustration that people have when they're really unhappy in their lives is because not only are they unhappy, not only do they not have the type of life that they want, but they're also not doing anything to try to improve it. So the moment that you change, you have like a paradigm shift in your head, you change your own perception, you change your own mindset, and you say, okay, you know what? I'm not happy with where we're at, and this is how I can change this. Then things will start happening. Then you'll also feel better about it because you'll be like, okay, maybe I'm not there yet where I want to be, but I'm on the right path. Our next one is titled, Husband Goes Out to Run and to the Gym While I Stay Home Taking Care of the Baby. OP says, ladies, how are your partners behaving after the baby was born? My son turned 3 weeks old this week and my partner went back to his PT classes, running, gym, massages. Well, I can't do none of that because I'm exclusively breastfeeding. I still have a little belly and I'm not feeling like we should be leaving the baby for the first 6 weeks, at least for such vain activities. I'm going to be fair and tell you that he does a lot of work at the house, like the laundry, cooking, groceries, but will not help me at night with the baby because he says it's my job, because he can't breastfeed. He does change a few diapers at night if I ask him, but what bothers me is him saying that taking care of the baby is only my job, and that running the house is his job because I can't pay bills, so he doesn't need to help with the baby. I started to resent him because I feel like we're both his parents and I shouldn't have to take care of the baby while he goes for a massage or the gym or running. Am I being unreasonable? I appreciate all the help he gives around the house, but at the same time, I feel like it's such a sexist thing to say that it's the woman's job to take care of the baby. Now to this one, I actually feel like OP is a little bit deluded and does not have the best understanding or any kind of overall comprehensive perception when it comes to her role as mother and his role as father. I don't know why this happens so often, but honestly, I feel like a lot of people, a lot of women especially, have they get very, very touchy. They get very sensitive when specific phrases are thrown around. One of those phrases might be, it's the woman's place to do X. Another phrase, as you can see here, is it's your job to do Y. And I think that really just comes from this knee-jerk response of it's not your place to tell me what my place is, right? I can decide by myself what's my job and what isn't my job. What really stands out to me here is that this husband does help out. So it's not that he's a deadbeat dad. It's not that he doesn't care about helping out around the house. It's not that he's like, yeah, okay, all the house stuff is your problem. All the kid stuff is your problem. I'm just going to work and then come home and chill and that's it. That is not the case at all. It is only the case that he asked her to look after the baby to handle the nights because he can't breastfeed. And that's, as far as I can tell, that's kind of it. The fact that he said it's her job to look after the baby is then the second part that she's annoyed at. So it's just the phrasing that he used in terms of how he asked her to look after the baby at night. Now, I say this as someone who also breastfeeds. And yes, that means that the vast majority of nighttime care is on me. That said, especially when our baby was very young, I did wake up my husband quite often and my husband helped out quite often. So it's definitely how you manage that as a situation, how you decide to handle it as a couple. And that's the thing that as a couple, you need to sit down and talk about together. And you need to say, hey, okay, I know that I need to be up to breastfeed anyway, but I need some help. I just can't handle the whole night by myself. We need to do a different split. Maybe you can handle this part of the night or that part of the night, or it's okay for me to wake you up and say, hey, go ahead. It's your turn now. Or it's okay for me to sleep in the mornings and for you to handle the baby during the morning. Whatever way you decide to split it, it's fair enough to say, I'm not happy with this and I'm a bit tired and a bit worn out and I need a little bit of support. And then you can just go and say that to your husband. It's not a big deal. I don't think that it's sexist to say that it's the woman's role to look after the baby when you're breastfeeding, especially. I think that it's kind of natural and that's the natural inclination that you will have, and that if he can't feed the baby, then that kind of takes out a big chunk of how he could be looking after the baby, right? Like the moment that the baby is hungry, he's going to be with you anyway. The other thing that I find a little bit sad about this is her annoyance. She says, I don't think we should be leaving the baby for the first 6 weeks for such vain activities. So she says things like going out to run and going to the gym, having PT, physiotherapy classes are all things that are vain. And I think that's a little bit unfair. I think for the vast majority of people, doing things like going to the gym are good ways to look after your health, both physical and mental. And I find it hard to say, hey, these are all just vanity, things that you do for vanity and nothing else. That said, honestly, if she has a 6-week-old baby, it would not even occur to me to start getting resentful. Like 6 weeks old, your baby is nursing quite a lot. Sleep is always just really, really disjointed. Like for us, I think the time between 3 and 8 weeks, I'd say, is when sleep was at its worst. And like I said, the husband seems to be helping out around the house as well. So to already be tired after 6 weeks of having a baby and having a 6-week-old and say, hey, how dare he suggest it's my job, I think is really over the top. And so what I would actually say to OP from an advice perspective would be, okay, the moment you feel yourself starting to get resentful about something, then that is a very, very, very giant red flag from your brain saying, hey, there's a problem here that you need to deal with. And so if you're resentful because you want to be able to go for a run, then figure out what you need in order to be able to go for a run. Although she says she doesn't want to go for a run, but that's fair enough. If you're resentful because you can't have any period of time to sleep that's longer than an hour or 2 hours, then you can also have this conversation with your husband and say, hey, look, what I really, really, really need is just 1 night of good sleep. Just 1 night. If you could give me that, I'll be really happy. You can bring a baby to me when I nurse and then you can take him again and I don't care about anything else. Whatever it is you need, you can just go ahead and do it. And I would probably say to try and move away in your head from this idea of it's sexist. for him to have XYZ expectation. It's sexist for him to use words like, it's your job to do this. I would try to move away from that, because I think the fact that he feels like it's your role makes sense from his perspective when he can't breastfeed. And there's no reason to take more offense to something that your spouse says than you need to. That's not good either. So that's how I feel about this one. I'll read some of the comments out for you. One person says, this has been our system, but it's been working for us. I do night shifts and he gets to sleep, but he runs errands during the day and he also makes breakfast and lunch. We both take turns doing dinner. And that's a perfect example of, hey, once you figure out a method that works for you as a couple, then suddenly you're a lot happier. If it feels equal and the spread is equal, by equal, I don't mean necessarily 50-50, but in that if you need time to sleep and he needs time to sleep, that you figure out a way that both of your needs are met, then people are generally speaking a lot happier. This person also says that she does a bottle feed and that makes a big difference. And then she says, my husband is really active and social. If he doesn't get out and moving, he gets anxious. He then wants us all to go out and walk. I don't always have the energy for that, so I encourage him to do stuff on his own. That's usually when the baby is sleeping anyway. He has suggested I get out and get my nails done, but I don't want to just yet. Ironically, I'm the person in my relationship who suggests that we all go out for a walk, because it's one of the things that I enjoy doing. And so it's just about every person understanding what their needs are, vocalizing those needs, and then you as a couple working together to have those needs met. This person said, not sure if your husband is like my husband, but going to the gym and exercising is important for his mental health. I personally wouldn't be resentful of him doing the things he needs to do to stay healthy, as long as he's also helping me when he's home. I exclusively breastfeed as well, so he can't help too much with the feedings, but he does housework and works and helps take care of the other kids for me. For night feeds, I see no point in him being up to help me because there's nothing for him to do. But when I return, he will watch the baby in the afternoon so I can nap with my toddler uninterrupted, etc., etc. You can see there is a million different ways that people separate tasks around the house and when it comes to childcare so that they both feel a lot better about it. This one I really appreciated. She said, this is our second baby, so I didn't expect to be doing things for myself right away. I had a repeat C-section and I'm breastfeeding, so I knew I'd basically be glued to the couch with the newborn. My husband works and we're not doing any formula, so I wouldn't ask him to get up in the night just to change a diaper or something when I'd end up needing to get up to nurse the baby back to sleep anyway. He's very helpful around the house with our toddler, and I feel very fortunate. I completely support his working out and taking care of himself. It keeps him stable and happy. I'm not exactly at my best right now while I recover, so I definitely don't have any desire for both of us to be mentally compromised. I guess I don't understand why you would resent taking care of your baby while he works out. If you weren't helping out with the other things, that would be a big issue, but it sounds like he is doing what he can. It might be a little bit sexist for him to say that taking care of the baby is your job. Both of you are responsible, but if he has a job outside the home and you are a mom staying at home, then it sounds like those are the roles you've both agreed to. If you don't want to stay home and take care of your baby, you could work and baby could go to daycare. It's true though that when you're breastfeeding a newborn, baby needs you far more than they need their father. And so that's just a bit of a reality check. I don't know why or how women get into this habit, or just a totally different perception, totally different understanding of what having a baby is like. And just accepting that this is a reality. This is going to be your reality for a few weeks, for a few months, for however long you choose for it to be your reality, and just being okay with that and understanding that maybe the father will be able to do things that you're not able to do, but that's okay. And at a different point in time, you can figure things out. And when you want to do things, still figuring out ways for you to do that, then it's really not a big deal. Then there's no need for this frustration. There's no need for the resentment. I suspect that a big part of the resentment comes from not quite having expected such a big change or a big shift in your life and in your lifestyle, and not being prepared for that mentally, not being able to accept that that's what things are like. But it's that urge to try and fight against that then causes a conflict in your relationship, which is unnecessary and avoidable if you both just sit down and talk it out. And so we come to our final thread of the day, which is titled, Am I the A-hole? I have been a stay-at-home mom since a month before my daughter was born. She's 13 months now. This has caused some financial strain in our household. So my mother offered for me and my daughter to stay with them for 6 months on the West Coast. So they can help watch my daughter while I work to pay off some debt and build up a small savings account while my husband goes back home so he can go back to work, take care of the house and the animals. And he would be in the south. So they would be very far away from each other. We agreed to this plan as it's the fastest way for us to pay off a huge chunk of debt since daycare around where we live is not trustworthy. When he told his parents, who live a few hours away from us, he told me his mum suggested that I go back home with him and get a job near our house and leave our daughter with them 5 days a week, and we can go visit on the weekends. I said, absolutely not. I will not give up that much time with my 1-year-old. My husband says I'm the a-hole because I'm not willing to sacrifice time with my daughter like he is doing. We will go visit him every other month for a week at a time, so he's not going a full 6 months without seeing her, and he's going to come to my parents' house in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. I think it's absurd that he thinks after being with my child every day for 13 months and being the primary caretaker, that he just expects me to switch to only seeing her on the weekends. I also am expecting backlash from his mother when he tells her that I refuse to basically allow her to raise my daughter for the next 6 months. He won't listen to any of my valid reasons, like never being away from her for more than a couple of hours, plus I'm still breastfeeding her at night before bed, and says I'm being selfish in expecting him to sacrifice time away from her without being willing to do the same. Am I the a-hole, or is this whole idea just as crazy as I believe it is? I believe that OP is the a-hole here, to be honest. And I don't mean it in like a mean way, but I think that both scenarios here that they came up with. So one scenario is she takes the kid and she moves in with her parents, and then they're separated for 6 months. So the dad doesn't see his child. I know she says that we'll be visiting him, blah, blah, blah. But essentially they're living in different households for 6 months and across quite a big chunk of the country. And the other scenario is the baby is staying with the grandparents and they're a lot closer, but they can only see the baby every weekend. Now, in general, I think both scenarios suck. I would not choose either scenario for myself or for my family. That said, if you're in a situation where you're like, hey, we're not really happy with how things are going, we're not happy with our finances, we need to change things up, we need to make some sacrifices, what can we do to fix it? And you come up with these two scenarios, then quite honestly, I would not be okay with being away from my child 5 days a week, but I would also not be okay with my child being away from her dad for 6 months. So it makes sense to me to not be okay with both. And it makes sense to me to be okay with both, but it does not make sense to me to say, hey, well, he can give up time with our kid, but as long as I don't have to give up time with my kid, that is what makes it inherently selfish. Then suddenly you are asking for a sacrifice from the dad that you yourself as the mother are not willing to make. And for all I believe that there is a difference in roles and responsibilities and relationships between mother and child and father and child, I still think fundamentally, if you're asking someone else to make a sacrifice that you're not willing to make, then that's something that you should really pay attention to, and that's something you should really think about. So I don't think that it is cool to say, I think it is absolutely absurd for you to suggest that I should be giving up time. Well, why can't you give up the same time? That's a bit of a dick move. I wouldn't do that. Now, a lot of people go, hey, OP writes a whole bunch about why these are the only options that they have available, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that it makes sense to go deeper into the scenarios that they have available to them, because ultimately this is a family decision. This is a decision that both of you need to sit down and hash out, and you need to come up with all the different options that you have available and see which compromise is going to hurt the least for both parties. And I think that requires you to think about this from the perspective of as a parent, not just from your perspective as a mother, where you go, hey, I want this and I don't really care what you get, but how do we get the maximum time with our child and still have the best possible financial setup for both of us? And sometimes it does involve some sacrifice. If he said, no, yeah, you know what, fair enough, I am more okay with being away from her for 6 months than asking you to be away from her for 5 days. And I think it's better for her to have at least one of us available all the time, then fair enough. But if he's already like, you know what, I really don't want to do this 6 month thing, then I would also hear that out, because I don't think that you can force someone. And I don't think that it's fair. It's just a totally unfair expectation to have. That's not how sacrifices work in a marriage. If you want to sacrifice something, both of you have to be completely 100% on board and agreed on exactly what you're sacrificing, that you both have to be on the same page, and that's the only way that you can handle it. First comment says, hey, all of these plans don't sound great. You're not the a-hole for not wanting to leave your daughter all week. That suggestion is absolutely insane. I also don't think it's a fair suggestion to have your husband live several states away from his wife and child. There has to be some other way to make this work. And then people try to give suggestions, but again, like, there's literally no point in anyone else giving suggestions, because no one understands what their circumstances are like. Next person says, so many things are wrong with this setup. I don't agree with living with family while you have a family, but you need your husband with you in a non-toxic environment. That's what your family provides. His mother is toxic and filling his head with rubbish that will make her the mother of your child, and you a brief parent on the weekends. I think this is actually totally unfair. There is absolutely nothing in the thread that suggests that. As far as we can tell, he called up his mom and he said, yeah, our finances are in a bit of a shitty position. We have to change things up a little bit. We were thinking about her moving with the kid hours and hours and hours away, halfway down the country for the next 6 months. And then his mom was like, oh, that kind of sucks. Maybe you can do this instead. Maybe that would be a better idea. That's the normal human way that conversation would have gone down. I think the suggestion and the accusation that the mother is toxic and she's looking for an opportunity to parent the child and to steal the child away sounds just awful. Like, I don't know why you would assume that. This person says, both of these plans sound pretty terrible, and I can see why he feels hurt that his attachment seems to be less important to you than your attachment is. While I would never give up a child 5 days a week, I also would not ask my husband to give up weeks with our child. Exactly. That's the point about it that makes it selfish and unfair. And then she says, there are so many flexible job opportunities that I would be looking for a job you can do when he is home or in your own time, even babysitting another similar age child while you're home with yours, whatever you need to do to bring in necessary income. Being a stay-at-home mom is a very expensive privilege, honestly, that many families cannot afford. And that's kind of exactly when you get to this point of, hey, the point is that you have to look for solutions that work for both of you as a couple, and expecting more from one side than you expect from the other one is never going to pan out in the long run. Like, that's not a good strategy for parenting in the long run. If you disagree with any of my takes about anything, feel free to leave a comment. Otherwise, feel free to subscribe for more similar content, and I will see you next time.